How close are we to the limits of great power rivalry? In 2026, the world faces a collision of crises that tests the boundaries of military strength, economic leverage, and diplomatic skill. The stakes are nothing less than the future of the global order. With Ukraine and Taiwan at the center, the fate of peace and power is being decided in real time, through missiles, summits, tariffs, and tense phone calls. We begin in Kyiv. On May 14, 2026, the city wakes to sirens and chaos as Russian missiles and drones rain down in one of the most relentless attacks since the war began. 56 missiles and nearly 700 drones target Ukraine's heart, killing at least 8 and injuring 44 in the capital alone. The Darnitsky district sees a residential block collapse, 18 apartments destroyed, families displaced, lives upended. Russian drones also strike a UN vehicle in Kherson, a stark signal that neither civilians nor international organizations are immune. These attacks are not isolated. The day before, 14 more people died and over 80 were wounded in strikes across the country. 24 railway sites and critical infrastructure are hit, crippling infrastructure just as Ukraine braces for another, unpredictable summer. The devastation is immediate, but the implications are global. President Zelensky calls these attacks among the longest and most massive of the entire war. He convenes his military advisors and orders his armed forces to draw up options for retaliation. The mood is grim, yet across the Atlantic a very different message emerges. President Trump, now back in the White House, claims a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is within reach. The contrast between words and reality could not be starker. As missiles fall, the promise of diplomacy seems distant. This disconnect exposes the limits of public diplomacy when facts on the ground, explosions, casualties, the destruction of homes, contradict official optimism. Russia's escalation speaks louder than any peace talk. Hungarian officials even summon Russia's ambassador after strikes land dangerously close to the border, underscoring how regional tensions threaten to spill over. The war in Ukraine is no longer a local crisis. It is a flashpoint in a larger contest among global powers. That contest becomes even clearer when we shift focus to Beijing. As Ukraine burns, President Trump arrives at the Great Hall of the People for a summit with President Xi Jinping. The stakes are immense. With him are American business leaders, Elon Musk, Jensen Huang, Tim Cook, each carrying their own agendas from technology to trade. The world's two largest economies are locked in their own struggle, with Taiwan looming as the most dangerous point of contention. China's position is unequivocal. For President Xi, Taiwan is not negotiable. He warns that any mishandling could push U.S. China relations into what he calls a very dangerous situation. The Chinese statement after the summit puts Taiwan front and center, emphasizing it as a red line. The official U.S. readout, by contrast, makes no mention of Taiwan at all. This silence is strategic but also revealing. Both sides are maneuvering, testing each other's resolve, calculating risks, probing for advantage. For the U.S. delegation, the immediate priority is trade. American businesses want market access and supply chain stability, especially after years of tariff battles. China, for its part, is focused on sovereignty and security. The underlying tension is clear. Economic interdependence is colliding with geopolitical rivalry. Taiwan becomes the symbolic and literal battleground where these interests intersect. Taiwanese officials respond quickly. Their Ministry of Foreign Affairs reiterates that the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China are not subordinate to each other, pushing back on Beijing's narrative. The island's parliament passes a record $25 billion defense budget, much of it earmarked for new U.S. weapons. The Trump administration has already approved an $11 billion arms package, with another $14 billion pending. China's Taiwan Affairs Office voices strong opposition to these sales, calling them a violation of sovereignty. Yet, in Taipei, Trump's relative silence on Taiwan during the summit is interpreted as a tactical win, buying time perhaps, or lowering the temperature, if only temporarily. But these diplomatic signals play out against a backdrop of hardening military postures. The U.S. commitment to Taiwan is being tested daily, with new arms deliveries and closer military cooperation. China's military drills around the island grow more frequent and more complex, part warning, part rehearsal. The risk of miscalculation rises with every maneuver, every shipment, every speech. Economic confrontation adds another layer of complexity. In 2025, the Trump administration imposed tariffs exceeding 140% on a broad range of Chinese goods, aiming to protect American industries and pressure Beijing. You're watching Today in Context, where we go beyond the headlines to explain the forces shaping the world around us. If this kind of analysis helps you make sense of the bigger picture, like the video and subscribe for more. China retaliated, targeting the U.S. where it hurts most, with new licensing requirements on any product containing more than 0.1% Chinese rare earth metals. This move threatened to disrupt supply chains for tech, defense, and green energy worldwide. The U.S. responded by rolling back some tariffs, about 100 percentage points worth, but the damage was done. Markets convulsed. Both sides paused, wary of escalation but unwilling to fully retreat. The legal front is just as uncertain. A U.S. court rules that Trump's tariffs were illegally enacted, though appeals continue. The administration considers further sanctions and tighter controls on chip exports, but stops short, wary of provoking an outright trade war. The net effect is a fragile détente, punctuated by sporadic escalations and uneasy truces. Global businesses, caught in the middle, are forced to hedge, diversify, and plan for the unpredictable. Each of these crises, military, economic, diplomatic, feeds into the other. Russian strikes on Ukraine draw in NATO's attention and resources, limiting how far the West can push in Asia. China's pressure on Taiwan forces Washington to recalibrate its commitments in Europe. Trade disputes sap the economic strength needed to sustain long-term competition. Retaliatory measures ripple through global supply chains, affecting everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to semiconductors. The interconnectedness is profound. What happens in the skies above Kyiv influences calculations in the South China Sea. Weapons packages destined for Taipei are scrutinized in Moscow, just as Russian advances in Donbass are watched in Washington and Beijing for signs of shifting resolve. Each actor is seeking leverage, on the battlefield, at the negotiating table, in the global marketplace. Complicating matters further is the unpredictability of domestic politics. In the United States, the return of President Trump brings both continuity and disruption. His administration's approach to tariffs and alliances is transactional, often unpredictable. In China, President Xi's consolidation of power allows for swift decisions, but also magnifies the consequences of miscalculation. Russia, under pressure from sanctions and battlefield setbacks, is betting that strategic escalation will buy leverage at the negotiating table. The result is a world in flux. Traditional rules and alliances are being tested, sometimes broken. The boundaries between war and peace, competition and cooperation are blurred. Each great power is probing the others, looking for signs of weakness or opportunity. Yet as crises pile up, the margin for error shrinks. Risk is everywhere. The chance of miscalculation, military or economic, is rising. A missile that strays across a border, a shipment of arms that triggers a blockade, a tariff that sparks a broader financial crisis. Each event has the potential to spiral, drawing in new actors, raising the costs, and making resolution harder. Amid all this, the human cost remains ever present. Ukrainian families shelter in basements as air raid sirens wail. Taiwanese citizens watch military exercises unfold just miles from their homes. Across the globe, businesses and consumers brace for higher prices, scarcer goods, and mounting uncertainty. No single actor controls the outcome. Each is constrained by its own ambitions, its domestic politics, and the actions of its rivals. Diplomacy is ongoing, but often reactive, more about crisis management than long-term solutions. The world watches, hoping that restraint will hold, that leaders will find off-ramps before disaster strikes. The fate of Ukraine and Taiwan, so different in geography and history, has become intertwined in this era of great power rivalry. Their struggles reveal the limits of military might, the complexity of economic interdependence, and the fragility of diplomatic solutions. As the U.S., China, and Russia maneuver for advantage, the rest of the world is left to navigate the uncertainty. What does this mean for the future? The answer is still unfolding. The convergence of armed conflict, trade disputes, and diplomatic tension is pushing the global order to its breaking point. Each crisis amplifies the next, exposing vulnerabilities and testing alliances. The only certainty is uncertainty itself. As military, economic, and diplomatic crises converge, the global order faces its most dangerous test in a generation. The world is learning, in real time, just how fragile peace can be, and how unpredictable the consequences are when great power ambitions collide. The outcome will shape the next decade and beyond, not just for Ukraine and Taiwan, but for all who depend on a stable and predictable international system. The stakes could not be higher. The stories that define tomorrow are already unfolding today. Subscribe to Today in Context for clear, grounded analysis of the events shaping our world, one story at a time.